Hey everyone, it's Saoirse, and today I want to talk to you about a big one. It is the second best-selling true crime classic of all time, behind only Helter Skelter, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. This is the moment that my cat chooses to get on my lap. So, I had heard about this one for a long time because I'm very into true crime, which you will know if you've seen my videos. I talk about it all the time. And this is kind of like, this is the big daddy. This is the one you hear about. So I didn't really know what to expect. But now having read it, I know that Truman Capote considers it a non-fiction novel, which is a very interesting type of genre because when you start it and you've got the idea of true crime in your head, you can't help but think, or I couldn't help but think, how does he know all of these details? How does he know all of this dialogue that went on between people who are no longer alive, people in situations where there was no witness, there's no way that we could know these things? Well, it's because a lot of this is imagined. I don't know if it's a lot, but definitely some scenes were created for the book, and some of the people who are mentioned in here, who are real people, say that Capote did make up or misrepresent certain aspects of things that happened. So you do have to take it with a grain of salt. This isn't going to be a extremely factual documentary, but it is a brilliant, stunning, gripping book that I could not put down. And if you know from my recent videos, I was in a really bad reading slump for a while, so getting into this and finding that I could not stop reading it was very, very exciting for me. So I want to, well, let's just give you a bit of my notes are over here. That's why I'm staring. Bit of a background. The Clutter family, 4 members of the Clutter family in Kansas, almost said Texas, in Kansas, were murdered brutally in their home. And it was Herb Clutter, his wife, Bonnie, and their children, Kenyon and Nancy. And their 2 older daughters had already moved away at this point. So it was the 4 of them in the home, and it was November 15th, 1959. And for a while, the killers were on the run, and we didn't know who they were. And so this book takes you through, it's really well done, and I feel like I'm not going to do it justice, but it takes you through the perspective of the victims, the killers, and all of the people in the town where this happened, and what they thought about it. So, obviously, as I said, there are scenes where there's no way that this dialogue could be completely accurate, but it is just so well done that you both believe it's true and you also feel like it's fiction. It's remarkable in that I don't think I've read anything else quite like this before. So let's go to, oh yeah, and it was published in 1965. So the murders happened in 1959. And Truman Capote started investigating. Before the killers were caught, he was already in the town and talking to people there. And he had a lot of encouragement and help from his friend Harper Lee, shout out. So he spent, I think, 6 years working on this book. And it was really his masterpiece. And then he went on to work on the movie as well. So I'm going to read a few things here. I don't always have, like, a big reason for why I like certain things, or in this book it wasn't so much the writing style. You'll see. Afterward, the townspeople, theretofore sufficiently unfearful of each other to seldom trouble to lock their doors, found fantasy recreating them over and over again, those somber explosions that stimulated fires of mistrust, in the glare of which many old neighbors viewed each other strangely and as strangers. So he's talking about the shotgun blasts that killed the family. And how after that, this town where people would normally not lock their doors, which I can't even imagine, but that is a thing, they're now all looking at each other like, was it you? Was it you? Who killed these people who were so well respected in the town? That's another thing, is Herb Clutter was a very prominent figure in the town of Holcomb, which makes it all the more strange that they would be targeted. Or maybe not strange, because when you're prominent, then people know who you are and they want what you have, unfortunately. Just a couple things about similes and description in the writing. This is about Nancy Clutter. Nancy was a pretty girl, lean and boyishly agile, and the prettiest things about her were her short bobbed, shining chestnut hair, brushed 100 strokes each morning, the same number at night, and her soap-polished complexion, still faintly freckled and rose-brown from last summer's sun. But it was her eyes, wide apart, darkly translucent, like ale held to the light, that made her immediately likable, that at once announced her lack of suspicion, her considered and yet so easily triggered kindliness. I love that part about, like, ale held to the light. That is such a beautiful simile. And I also love how he gives us a lot about the victims at the beginning, so that it's all the more devastating when we know what happens to them and how it happens, and then it's so upsetting, because these are real people and they had real lives and hopes and everything. Here's another simile, and this one it's about one of the killers. Because he hates me, said Perry, whose voice was both gentle and prim, a voice that, though soft, manufactured each word exactly, ejected it like a smoke ring issuing from a parson's mouth. And I like that with these images you can kind of draw your own whatever interpretation from it. Like, what does a smoke ring issuing from a parson's mouth mean to you? I saw it as like something bad coming out of the mouth of somebody who's, we typically see as good, and they're kind of speaking evil. But I think there's a lot of ways you can interpret these things. And I like that Capote doesn't hit you over the head with a lot of this flowery language. I'll get into this in a second. So let's go to these descriptions of Bonnie and Nancy. This is about Bonnie. As a girl, she had won an elocution prize. Maturity, it seemed, had reduced her voice to a single tone, that of apology, and her personality to a series of gestures, blurred by the fear that she might give offense, in some way displeasure. And that just made me so sad. Bonnie, you'll come to know she's, I think, what we would call depressed and anxious now, but back then, she's very nervous. It's one of her nervous spells. And they just didn't talk about mental health openly, but it was known that Bonnie was not well. And then about her daughter, somebody says, Nancy Clutter is always in a hurry, but she always has time. And that's one definition of a lady. And I just thought it's kind of sad too, when they talk about Nancy and how she did so much for other people. She was always helping people with everything, and she spent so much of her time being constantly busy, but she was made time for people. And she sounded like a remarkable young woman and had so much potential. But the pressure that is put on people to be successful at a young age, you just wonder, did she want to have some of that time to herself? And then all of her time gets cut short because of these two awful people. We're moving right along here. Oh yeah, I like how Capote, he does this juxtaposition of things that are normal, just everyday things, and then how they are tragic. So he says, this is about Nancy. Tonight, having dried and brushed her hair and bound it in a gauzy bandana, she set out the clothes she intended to wear to church the next morning. Nylons, black pumps, a red velveteen dress, her prettiest, which she herself had made. It was the dress in which she was to be buried. I have to stutter on the last word. I love that. And I hate it. And it's so sad that she made this beautiful dress and she's proud of it, and then she's buried in it. Yeah, I just think it's very clever the way that he sets things up. so that we care about them, and then we're devastated, and we care, and we're devastated, and it's this awful cycle that just keeps you reading. Let's see, what am I trying to read here? He says, imagination, of course, can open any door, turn the key, and let terror walk right in. And I just liked that sentence, but that's an example of something that he doesn't do very often, I think. And I read this review on Goodreads. Somebody said that like the writing style is so overwrought and like it was so offensive to them, just the writing style. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because it's so sparing, and he rarely makes interjections like that. And he separates himself so much that it feels like there is no narrator. It is like the story is telling itself. So I have no idea what that person's talking about. The writing is not flowery. It's just perfect. It's so perfectly done, with nothing extra and yet nothing held back. It gives you exactly what you want from it and what you need from the story. Yeah, so the bad reviews I honestly do not understand, because the writing is absolutely stunning. And not in terms of it being like a gorgeous style. Like I talk about Charlotte Bronte all the time and her writing style. It's not that, it's the way that he crafts the story. It's not so much the words, but where he puts them, if that makes sense. So in this book, there's a lot about the death penalty, and I think it really allows you to kind of draw your own conclusion about how you feel about the death penalty. It brings up a lot of issues that are big and have been a topic of conversation for a long time, still are today. So this is, who's saying this? Oh, this is Bonnie Clutter's brother. He says, I have even heard on more than one occasion that the man, when found, should be hanged from the nearest tree. Let us not feel this way. The deed is done, and taking another life cannot change it. Instead, let us forgive as God would have us do. It is not right that we should hold a grudge in our hearts. The doer of this act is going to find it very difficult indeed to live with himself. His only peace of mind will be when he goes to God for forgiveness. Let us not stand in the way, but instead give prayers that he may find his peace. So it's interesting to see the people who feel that way versus the ones who go the opposite direction and think they need to be punished to the full extent of the law for what they've done. And to be honest, I don't know how I feel. I have very mixed feelings in these cases about the death penalty, because on one hand you get so upset about what they've done, that they've taken away a life, and it seems obvious at first that they don't deserve to live because they cut somebody's life short. But at the same time, who are we to then end another life? It's a very, very controversial and difficult topic. I don't have time to get into too much here, but this book really makes you think about it quite a lot. This is just an example of how Capote starts scenes sometimes. So this is, the book is in like sections. It's not really chapters. There are 4 or 5 main like big sections, and then within that are these little sections. A cloudburst, rain, buckets of it. And that's just the first line there. And I love how he sets the scene. He starts sections often by doing that. Not every time, but he'll often start with like the weather or the setting, like what are you seeing around you, and you really feel like you are in this, little Kansas town, and you can see the sort of bleak landscape and the farms and just the giant flat land, and he makes you feel the weather, and he just gets you right in there, so okay, here we are, like I've located myself for this particular scene. Let's do it. What's gonna happen next? Okay. Oh, there's a bit of a spoiler here. I don't know how people feel about spoilers in books that are nonfiction, but if you don't want to know something about the killers, then skip ahead. I have no idea where I'm trying to start. Oh yeah. So this is Perry. The killers are Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, and Perry is confessing at this point. And he's talking about when he is with Mr. Clutter, about to kill him. And, oh yeah, it says, just before I taped him, Mr. Clutter asked me, and these were his last words, wanted to know how his wife was, if she was all right. And I said she was fine, she was ready to go to sleep. And I told him it wasn't long till morning, and how in the morning somebody would find them, and then all of it, me and Dick and all, would seem like something they dreamed. I wasn't kidding him. I didn't want to harm the man. I thought he was a very nice gentleman, soft-spoken. I thought so right up to the moment I cut his throat. So, throughout, this comes pretty late in the book, throughout the book, Capote has you really feeling for Perry and thinking that Dick is the one who talked him into it, and he's the mastermind, and he's the really evil one, and Perry's the one who was abused so much as a child, and we should feel sorry for him. And perhaps he didn't pull the trigger at all. And then you get this horrifying passage where you find that he cut his throat and then he shot everyone. At first he says that that he only shot 2 of them and Dick shot the other 2, but then he goes on to say, no, I actually did shoot all of them. And you're so shocked by that because at this point you really feel like Perry is this just, sad sack, like poor kid who grew up with this awful, awful childhood, and Dick is just this evil, crafty psychopath, and you think for sure he's the one who did it, who did all of it. So to know that, at least, we'll never know what really happened because we just have their confessions to go by, and like they're both very good at lying, especially Dick Hickok. So we'll never know, but knowing that Perry confessed to everything is just like the ultimate shock, and I think Capote did a really good job of pulling us in the other direction, like wanting to believe it wasn't Perry. Oh yeah, so that brings me to, this is about the Kansas Bureau of Investigation guy, Alvin Dewey. So he says, nonetheless, he found it possible to look at the man beside him without anger, with rather a measure of sympathy. For Perry Smith's life had been no bed of roses, but pitiful, an ugly and lonely progress toward one mirage and then another. Dewey's sympathy, however, was not deep enough to accommodate either forgiveness or mercy. He hoped to see Perry and his partner hanged back to back. So this brings up the question of, should we pity killers? And I think about this a lot because of the amount of true crime that I listen to and read. Should we pity people because often, almost always, people who kill had difficult childhoods. Often they were abused. Often they were taught that there is no other way to get by in life than to be violent, because that's what was shown to them. So, of course, I couldn't help feeling pity, especially for Perry. But at the same time, I can't really forgive murder. I can't forgive it. And it's very sad because Perry talks about in the moment when he is killing Herb Clutter, he says that like maybe it wasn't him, it wasn't this man, it was maybe that he was just the one that was there that had to pay for all of the things that had been done to Perry throughout his life. And that isn't fair, and it's not okay to take an innocent life. But this book makes you really think all these complicated thoughts about what is innocence, who's innocent, and who's guilty, and is it really our upbringing and the people who hurt us who are guilty? But unfortunately you can't punish those people. The law says you punish the person who does the crime. So yeah, it's very, very difficult, this book, but very worth it. Oh, there's somebody, this is just a random person who a reporter talked to, and they said, I think they ought to be locked in the same cell for the rest of their lives, never allowed any visitors, just sit there staring at each other till the day they die. So there are a lot of different opinions. I think that is a pretty good punishment, actually, to just have to sit there with each other, like knowing like this is the person who ruined my life because I took part in this crime with them. To sit there forever and never have visitors and that's it would be pretty terrible. And often I think that certain forms of punishment, like isolation, are much worse than death. So capital punishment is sort of an easy way out for some people who deserve much worse. But then who are we to be doling out judgment and punishment? And yeah, it's all very complicated. Oh yeah, this is Perry writing about his life. And he's talking about this woman who abused him when he was a child. She was later discharged from her job, but this never changed my mind about her and what I wished I could have done to her and all the people who made fun of me. And this just reminded me of Columbine and how it's this like blind revenge against the world because the people that these people kill, they aren't the ones who inflicted the damage. They are totally innocent bystanders, often unknown by the killers. And yet they have to pay the price for what these people feel has been done to them by the world as a whole. It's not just specific people who abuse them. It's like it's all of humanity. And it's such flawed thinking, and it's so scary that so many people who are bullied or abused or hurt in some way in their childhood go in this direction. And, you know, like, I was bullied really, really bad as a kid. But I'm not a killer. And I just think children need so much more support than we give them, and they need to be taken seriously. And when there are warning signs, they need to be taken seriously, because often there are very, very big warning signs. And then things escalate to this point where now all of these people are dead, and what did we do to stop it? So this is during the trial, I think. Our state provides that the punishment for murder in the first degree shall be imprisonment for life or death by hanging. That is the law. You, gentlemen, are here to enforce it, and if ever there was a case in which the maximum penalty was justified, this is it. These were strange, ferocious murders. 4 of your fellow citizens were slaughtered like hogs in a pen. And for what reason? Not out of vengeance or hatred, but for money. Money. It was the cold and calculated weighing of so many ounces of silver against so many ounces of blood. And how cheaply those lives were bought. For $40 worth of loot. $10 a life. It is so, so devastatingly sad that that's what it was. I mean, it was this robbery where they ended up with almost nothing anyway. It was just pointless, completely pointless, the whole thing. So I think there is room to pity and feel sorrow for all suffering, and that includes those of the killers, the suffering of the killers, and the suffering of the victims. I think life isn't black and white, and suffering isn't black and white. There's this part where Perry says, while he's in prison waiting to die, I pretend I'm a tiny little baby that can't keep its eyes open. And that's how he sleeps all day, and that's how he spends his time. And that just broke my heart. Like, there's this broken person who has now ended all of these lives, and he's reverted back to acting like a tiny little baby so that he can sleep the last days of his life away. That just kills me. And then I was going to read the final words of the killers, but I don't really have time now. Basically, Hickok, he says, I have no hard feelings. You people are sending me to a better world than this ever was. And Perry says, I think it's a hell of a thing to take a life in this manner. Don't believe in capital punishment. It would be meaningless to apologize for what I did, even inappropriate, but I do. I apologize. So, I really recommend this book. It makes you think a whole lot. I think it's very, very important, and brings up a lot of things that are relevant today. That's the thing about great literature. It's always relevant. So let me know what you thought about this book. If you read it, let me know if I should watch the movie next. I've never seen it before. And thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. Happy reading.